So thank you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, for the opportunity of coming here to have a conversation on the mechanics of digital transformation and how the future of cybersecurity can essentially have impact with specific focus in Nigeria. So I will begin by taking you back to your secondary school education. I recall vividly that they said that before the end of the 18th century, that the material component of the universe was studied as one aspect of culture called natural philosophy. But as time went on, nature was found necessary to be divided into two broad categories called the biological and the physical science. So one thing that was evident there is that we went into a world where some of the finest thinkers, philosophers, were looking at the great debate, what they called the material components of the universe. I recall vividly in Futo, in my first year in university, a professor was asking this question: what is this world made up of, and what is the world made up of? So Thales said the world is made up of water. Heraclitus said the world is made up of fire. But I like what Pythagoras, the guy that gave us the Pythagoras theory, he said that the world is made up of numbers. So if the world is made up of numbers, the implication is that everything we do is nothing but business of numbers. So in other words, the business of banking is the business of numbers. The business of retail is the business of numbers. The business of is business, all mechanics of market systems, all of them are business numbers. So the impact is this: as we need to understand the numbers in any domain or in any sector, we need to have the capacity to actually understand the frictions which customers are having. So as the world moves into digital transformation, what is happening is that the relationship between demand and supply, companies have better understanding. So when you look at the numbers coming from your customers, you understand the best possible way you are customer. When you see the numbers coming from your partners, you understand the best possible to serve your customer. So as a result of this, across human history, one thing has been consistent. How can we process numbers? How can we manipulate numbers? How can we deal with numbers? From the abacus slide rule to the time of the difference engine in the 17th century, to the invention of ENIAC, to the time that Shockley invented the transistor, to the time Jacobi invented the microprocessor, the world has been looking for one thing: digitization, processing, and the computational capabilities of numbers. So that is the reason why, if you look through human history, you see that we have been transitioning for a time when many things were done with guesswork to the time when we are making decisions with numbers. So this digital transformation is taking a lot of, it's going to be decades long, especially in Africa. So we are just at the early phase of it. I would have shown you the trajectory and the correlation, what United States of America and what Russia, what China, and what other parts of the world have done, and how we as a people, especially in Africa, we can also get into that redesign, because we are moving into that era of inventive societies and innovation societies. So as that happens, there is going to be massive level of redesigns. If the world of business is dependent on understanding the numbers of business, the implication is that companies or nations that actually make decisions based on data are going to have a very huge advantage to compete in the marketplace. And if we do that, it means increasingly people will move into the digital space, because it gives them the opportunity for them to advance the efficiency in the utilization of factors of production. The factors of production here, we are not looking at knowledge systems in the market system. How do we improve it? But as that happens, we are connecting the world into an amalgam of networks, bringing people, bringing companies, bringing continents together, and then so that transactions can happen in the digital space. So that also opens up to many risks. And one of those great risks is that as we are trying to do the right thing, there are also people that are trying to also do the wrong things. And that is how the cybersecurity space now comes into being. But my postulation here is that there are going to be a need for us to have two dimensions of how we are going to build resilience in the cybersecurity space, especially in a place like Nigeria. I believe vividly that companies have to do what they have to do, but of course, necessity is that Nigeria as a nation also needs to invest in building the critical enablers that will help us to participate very, very creatively in the digital space. No one today is quantifying what we lose as a result of cybersecurity related issues, because our legal ordinance has not even made it possible for us to know exactly what our companies are going through. So we don't do a lot of disclosures because no one requires those things. But if you go into some of our entities and companies, the intellectual properties are being exploited by adversaries and enemy territories. So how are we going to look into that construct? I do believe vividly that time come from the Nigerian military to actually look into building a Nigeria Cyber Command Center. A Nigeria Command Center is going to mirror what they have today in the United States of America, because adversaries and the challenges in the 21st century will not just be between companies and companies. We are having nation states going against companies. We're now having nations going to actually opportunity capabilities that companies have actually built over years. So if we do not protect our banking system, if we do not protect our startups, if we do not protect the companies of the future that we are going to depend in order for us to rise, we will never be in a good position for us to compete. So I look at it that if we go into building cyber command, in that cyber command system, you have the intelligence part, you also have the warfighter part. And we are going to also make sure that it is extremely organic. When I use the word organic, means it's not just going to Israel or going to the United States of America to import an equipment, but rather going through the level of secondary and primary schools to actually find young people who have the capabilities that we can train them to become citizens that can help us to defend our territory. The future to be very, very different, because the nations we have today are going to win through the capabilities that they develop, especially through these knowledge systems. So if you see where we are today in Nigeria, you see some of these startups raising millions of dollars. You see some of these entities creating these paper millionaires. What we are learning here is that the rich people of the future possibly are going to become people that make money through this. You know, if you look at Kuda Bank, how just within less than 5 years, you have $1 million bank. But if you combine more than 10 banks in Nigeria to trade in Nigeria exchange, all their market capitalization cannot equate to what we have in Kuda Bank. If you look at what Florida Wave has done, if you look at what even InterSwitch, some of these entities, we are still at the level of infancy. So the question for us as a people is, if we begin to see this massive level of wealth being created, it's going to be the role of our national territorial defense system, make sure that we are necessary that these companies are protected. So I don't want to look into the whole construct of how can GT Bank protect itself, how can Dangote Cement protect itself, rather, how can the territorial national cyberspace of Nigeria be? It is going to be a very critical thing, and it's going to be necessary that we have a cyber command center that will be responsible for actually making sure that our companies are not open to national security threats coming from other countries. Recently, I was in Russia. I had an opportunity of being invited by the mayor of Moscow to give a speech. And I was going through the question and answer section after the presentation. A lot of people asked me the question that when we try to hack Nigerian entities, that sometimes the networks are slow, they time out. And I made a joke to a bank CEO when I later came back and say, hey, maybe we don't have to have very fast networks. Because when we begin to have very fast networks, there is also the possibility that the exposures to risk will begin to scale. So the point is this: as we continue to advance, as we continue to make progress, we have to really connect back. How are we going to defend? There are so many pieces. But one thing that is evident is this, that knowledge systems are going to be very critical in how we are going to drive. Unfortunately, I can't have access to my slides, but I would have shown you a redesign right from the time of Jao Kibil invention of a transistor microprocessor to the time that we are here today, and the correlation, how Nigeria has actually tracked in so many elemental components how that future is going to be. About 100 years ago, if you go to the United States Stock Exchange, some of the biggest companies in the United States were steel companies. Then later, about 50, 60 years ago, you see companies like IBM becoming the largest company in the United States. Today, their largest companies are knowledge companies like Apple, Microsoft. Our largest exchange are infrastructure companies like Bua, Dangote Cement, and you look at food companies like Nestle. You also look at telecommunication companies like MTN and Airtel Africa. Then, as you project your future, you will see that our long-term hope, at least over the next 100 years, will actually be how these digital companies can actually begin to expand within Nigeria, but also within Africa. And if we do that, we're going to capture massive level of value. But I also land up here, I want to say this, that Nigeria has a GDP of around 500 billion for a population of 210 million people. If you look comparative analysis, you see that we have actually underperformed across many metrics. But digitization is going to open up massive level of opportunity across different domains of our industrial sectors. You're going to see how it can happen in agriculture. You're going to see what happens in healthcare services. You're going to see what is happening in retail. And then young people are coming up with better business models. Look at what they are doing in B2B retail. Companies like Aliso, Trade Depot, they are coming up with better models that are actually giving them opportunity for them to raise tons of millions of dollars. So the future is the one of abundance. And I'm very, very confident that that future will come. But how are we going to secure it? I don't just think that these companies should be left alone. That is why I think time has come that our nation must take cybersecurity as a very, very critical thing, because Nigeria now is beginning to develop intellectual property that we have to protect as a people. I wrote recently in Harvard Business Review, I made this hypothesis that if Nigeria wants to rise by mimicking China, we are going to have a very big problem. Because what worked for China about 30 years ago may not be relevant for Nigeria today. The cheap labor that China exploited from Western Europe and United States of America to advance, some of those jobs are going to be done by robots and artificial intelligence. So if robots are doing those jobs in Western Europe and United States, there may not even be a need for America to exploit those jobs to China. In other words, we cannot say that when wage rises up in China, that the jobs will begin to come to Africa, because China will become very expensive and Americans will send the jobs to us. What is going to happen here is this. We need to pioneer a new vista, how as a people we are going to be competitive. And I can see pockets of innovation systems across Nigeria and across Africa. But the key thing here is how we are going to make sure that people outside this continent are not necessarily going to steal the sparks of innovation. So you go around many parts of this nation, you see very brilliant ideas coming up. Those brilliant ideas are going to be the part of the future of this country. So I want to thank you so much. Unfortunately, I cannot share my slide. I would have done this in a more coordinated and institutionalized way. But I want to thank you for the opportunity. So if anyone has any question just before I round up, I will be very happy to. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak before you. Thank you.